Yeah.
We're on. Well,
yes.
Good afternoon. I know it's been a long day. We're nearly at the end, so well done for making it this far. Self-help books, motivational speakers, networking events. We love the story of David and Goliath. This is where there's a little guy up against someone much bigger, and spoilers, the little guy wins. It's heartwarming, inspiring. We love reading stories about plucky underdogs who triumph against the odds to defeat an opponent much bigger. One of the most famous examples in recent years is Leicester City winning the Premier League in 2016. They were such underdogs that at the start of the season, the odds of them winning were 5,000 to 1. And yet, in a fairy tale story come true, they triumphed against the odds and won. Now, unfortunately, the problem with David and Goliath stories is they are the exception and not the norm. We like them so much precisely because they don't happen often. Nearly 50% of all new businesses in the US fail in the first 5 years. They all thought they were plucky underdogs who would triumph against the odds, but they didn't. Mount Everest is littered with the corpses of hundreds of highly motivated people who all thought they were the underdog who would defeat the mountain, and they didn't. And sadly for Leicester City, they suffered 2 consecutive relegations and now play in the 3rd tier of English football. That fairy tale story had a pretty sour ending. Now, this is not meant to depress you, but the analogy of David and Goliath has a couple of problems. The first is that our survivorship bias means we automatically associate with the minority of underdogs who won and not the majority who didn't. We assume that we are special and different and we will win, and everyone else who didn't, well, they're just losers, but we'll be different this time. The second problem is that it frames real-life situations as an adversarial contest, a fight to the death, where you must defeat the person bigger than you, and there can only be one winner. Now, granted, for Rocky Balboa, the rules of boxing mean that he does have to knock out his opponent. There can only be one winner and one loser. But life is not as rigidly defined as a boxing match. And if we go through life with the idea that we must fight everyone and we must fight our way to the top, we're probably going to set ourselves up for burnout, frustration, and disappointment. It's certainly something I've felt when I have been unable to reach the goals that I've set for myself. And perhaps it's something that you've felt as well. The feeling of being a little fish swimming around in a very big bowl full of fish who are a lot bigger than you. So is it time that we find some other analogies? I think it is. Here's one. Imagine that you're a little fish swimming around in the ocean, and suddenly you see a big shark. Now, as a fish, you have 2 main choices here. You can either swim away, because in the natural world, the big fish eat the little fish, or you can be a really plucky fish and try to fight the shark, in which case you're probably just going to be eaten anyway. Now, in this situation, fight or flight is not particularly useful, and running away is not a successful strategy for life. But you are a clever little pilot fish, and you have found another way of doing things. You've discovered that you can nibble on the bacteria and the scraps that gather around the shark. And the shark goes, oh, hang on. Well, you're keeping me clean. I guess I'm not going to eat you this time. And so there develops this highly unusual symbiotic relationship where two organisms at opposite ends of the food chain form a mutually beneficial partnership. The little fish doesn't get eaten, and it gets to eat some tasty scraps, and the shark gets a living car wash. So we see how they have found a third way of approaching things. The little fish did not need to defeat the shark. Now, this analogy is not perfect, but I hope it illustrates what I'm trying to explain. And this feeling of being a little fish is something that I felt in most of my career. So I'm a historian and filmmaker from Leeds, and it's always a bit embarrassing to go on stage and talk about your achievements, but as you heard, I published a book, I've been on TV, I've been on billboards. There I am on the Trinity Shopping Centre in Leeds, and I'm also in the British Film Institute Digital Archive. And I'm very proud of these successes, of these achievements. And you're probably thinking, well, she must be a pretty big deal to have done all that. I mean, she must have 50,000 subscribers. And it's always a bit embarrassing, because I actually don't. I don't have 50,000 subscribers. I don't have 20,000 subscribers. I only have 14,000. Now, don't get me wrong, 14,000 is not bad at all. You know, it's a nice number. But there are countless channels out there with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, getting millions of views, operating on a level that I could only dream of. And I felt a lot of frustration about this. You know, why am I not getting bigger? Why are people not watching me? Oh, just like Van Gogh, maybe my art will only be appreciated after my lifetime. And if you're in any kind of business or any kind of numbers industry, you can probably relate to this feeling, you know, why am I so small? And yet, I have achieved these things. So one of the ways that I avoided this feeling of frustration and burnout was to have a different perspective. Because here's the thing, I've not defeated anyone, right? Those channels are still bigger than me, and they're still getting a lot bigger. And that's okay. I don't need to fight my way to the top. What I decided to do was to make the most out of what I had. How can I extract as much value with what I can and leverage that over what I don't? And then I don't need to worry about not being as big as everyone else. So I started my channel in 2018. Now, I never studied film or history or media, so I genuinely had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to film or to edit. I just had an iPhone 4 and a dream. And so my early videos were very bad. But I had to come up with creative responses to the challenges I faced. So, we'll come to that in a minute. A big challenge was that I didn't know how to edit or animate things. You see people with amazing graphics and animations, and I couldn't do any of that. The only way I could communicate my information was to say it to the camera. So I had to teach myself public speaking. And because I had to do it, it became natural to me. And I became quite good at it. And suddenly I had a face on the screen and a personality and a bit of charisma. As a child, I loved dressing up. I was never bought costumes. As a kid, I had to make do with what I could find in the wardrobe. So I started wearing costumes and props, and that made me stand out, because now I was this strange girl talking about history and wearing funny clothes. I tried a bit of music as well. I'm not a great musician by any means, But I learnt the guitar as a teenager, and there were times when I'd want to use a copyrighted song, but I thought, well, I'll have a go myself. And so that made me stand out. Now, the theme of this conference has been convergence, which is the drawing together of multiple influences to create something new. My focus was, what can I use to make the best thing right now? So in 2020 and 2021, I was selected for a national YouTube campaign highlighting regional creators. And to this day, I still have a little bit of imposter syndrome because my channel was tiny. I didn't even have 10,000 subscribers then. But I've had to accept that they saw value in me because I was this very strange northern working class woman talking about history, wearing costumes, and doing something which was very unusual. So there I am, dressed as Amy Johnson. She was the first woman to fly solo from England to Australia in 1930. And that was in London, in Leeds, in newspapers. It was quite good, really. And then a couple of years later, some TV people wanted an energetic young historian to talk about history, and they found me again. The whole point of this is that I didn't succeed because I had worked my way to the top. My channel is still tiny. I succeeded because I focused on what I could do right now. What can I do well? How can I extract value with what I have and leverage it over what I don't? So let's have a look at a real-world example. Oh, this is my face again. You've probably never heard of Supermacs if you've not been to Ireland. Now, Supermacs are Ireland's largest domestic fast food franchise. They have 118 restaurants across the country. And that might sound a lot, but in the vast world of multinational fast food conglomerates, they're tiny. To put it into perspective, McDonald's has more restaurants in London than Supermacs has in the entire country of Ireland. So they're not a very big deal. But in 2024, they won a landmark European Court of Justice copyright case against McDonald's. Now, at the time, this was described as David and Goliath because the little business had defeated the multinational conglomerate. But what they missed was that Supermacs never set out to take down McDonald's. Their business model was not built on defeating a big competitor. They started and grew as a business because they focused on their brand, on customer loyalty, on their identity as an Irish fast food franchise. And so when it came to the crunch, to this showdown with McDonald's, they already had the branding which won them the case. But they didn't set out to defeat McDonald's. So where does that leave us? Is there still value in David and Goliath? Of course. We love Moneyball and The Big Short, and already in the World Cup, there's been some upsets. But for the complexities of life, if we are a small fish swimming around in a big ocean, then if we go in with the mindset of we must defeat everyone bigger than us, we're probably going to get disappointed. But what we can do is focus on doing well with what we have. How much value can I extract with what I have and leverage it over what I don't? So I want to finish by paraphrasing C.S. Lewis. In one of his talks, in his letters, he mentioned David and Goliath, and he said, everyone wants to be David, defeating the giant. But you are not David. You have not been called to kill the giant. You've only just enlisted. Go back and do your drill. We don't have to be David killing the giant. We can be the plucky little pilot fish finding an alternative way of doing things. Thank you.